The first time I saw Private Casey Harper, she was kneeling in the mud, her uniform half soaked, scrubbing the concrete floor of the barracks while the rest of us stood in formation, shivering under the morning drizzle. Drill Sergeant Miller's voice cut across the yard like a whip. "Look at her! Who sent you here? A daycare?" The platoon snickered, but Casey didn't flinch. She just kept scrubbing, her hands steady, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the humiliation. I couldn't stop staring. Something about her calm in the middle of mockery made me uneasy. "She thinks she belongs here," someone whispered, laughing under their breath. And for a second, the words hung in the air, sour and sharp. Casey didn't respond. Not a word. Not a flinch. Just the rhythm of her movements, precise and unbroken. What I didn't realize then was that quiet strength often hides where no one thinks to look. Casey had shown up at Fort Ridgefield with nothing but a faded duffel bag and boots that had clearly seen better days. Her uniform didn't fit perfectly. Her hair was tucked haphazardly under a regulation cap. The other trainees, all polished and arrogant, whispered about her accent, the way she walked, the quiet way she carried herself. They assumed weakness, assumed ineptitude, assumed she would break first. But from the moment she arrived, there was a strange tension, like the air itself paused when she moved. Drill Sergeant Miller had taken an immediate disliking. During morning PT, he singled her out, barking at her in front of the platoon. "Harper, you call that a push-up? Are you trying to get us all killed in the field?" Casey's arms shook, her palms against the wet dirt, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft yet unwavering. "Yes, Sergeant." The words were a whisper, almost swallowed by the morning fog, but in that whisper was a quiet defiance that none of the others could match. Miller's eyes narrowed, and the tension in the yard shifted like static before a storm. In the mess hall later that morning, the platoon sat in rows, trays rattling against the long metal tables. Casey quietly ate her breakfast, oatmeal and black coffee. No sugar, no complaints. A fellow trainee, Lucas, smirked and muttered, loud enough for her to hear, "Planning on surviving on grit alone, huh? Or did Mommy pack this lunch?" The table erupted in laughter. Casey didn't look up. Her hand tightened around the fork for a brief second, just enough for you to notice. But then she went back to her meal. I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Not anger, not embarrassment, just focus. Through all of this, Corporal Johnson, a lanky trainee who had been in the Army longer than most of us, watched quietly from across the room. He didn't speak up, didn't defend her, but his eyes lingered on her like he could see more than the others did. He nodded slightly when she finished eating and slipped quietly out of the mess hall without a word. That small gesture, it was almost imperceptible, hinted that maybe, just maybe, someone noticed her for what she really was. Back in the barracks, the whispers continued. Casey's bunk was the last in the row, tucked away like she was an afterthought. Her locker was scuffed, her belongings minimal, and yet she arranged them with a meticulous care that no one else paid attention to. The other trainees mocked the way she polished her boots, saying it was a waste of time. "You're not going to shine your way to victory, rookie," one laughed. But Casey's eyes, scanning the rows of boots lined perfectly at inspection, were steady. She wasn't polishing them for approval. She was readying herself for something no one else could see coming. Drill Sergeant Miller's scrutiny didn't let up. During an afternoon weapons inspection, he barked, "Harper, your rifle, clean it again. You're giving the enemy a free shot." Casey bent low, methodical, moving through the steps with precision. Sweat ran down her forehead, the barrel gleamed under her careful hands, and still, she didn't complain. The other trainees snickered behind her back, whispering predictions of failure. I thought that was the end of it. She'd finally break, and the laughter would feel victorious. But then everything changed in ways I couldn't imagine. As evening fell, the platoon gathered for the last formation. Fog rolled across the yard, mixing with the smell of wet earth and worn leather. Casey stood at attention, silent and still. Miller circled the platoon, his eyes sharp, landing on her as if deciding her fate. He stopped. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then he barked an order that none of us expected. "Tomorrow, Harper, you lead the obstacle course drill. Show us what you're made of." The murmurs were instant, some mocking, some shocked. Casey's lips pressed together. Not a smile, not a frown, just a subtle nod, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. That night, as I lay in my bunk, I kept thinking about her. Quiet, unassuming, and yet somehow untouchable. The barracks had been cruel, the laughter sharp and relentless. But there was a spark in her I couldn't shake, and I knew deep down that tomorrow would be different. What I never expected was just how different it would be, and what would happen when the full weight of her hidden strength finally came to light. The next morning, the drizzle had turned to steady rain, and the barracks yard was a slick patchwork of mud and puddles. Private Casey Harper arrived early, boots caked with yesterday's grime, uniform wringing wet. Yet she carried herself with the same quiet precision. The platoon groaned when Drill Sergeant Miller barked the day's orders. Extra drills, obstacle courses, and an endurance run in the downpour. "If you think you're ready for the field, show me. Move!" he snapped, and the group scattered. Most of us were already grumbling, slipping and sliding through the muck, voices carrying a mixture of annoyance and fear. Casey didn't join the complaints. She adjusted her soaked cap, tightened her jacket, and went straight to the first station. She moved with purpose, each motion measured. I watched as Lucas, the trainee who'd mocked her breakfast yesterday, fell on his face mid-sprint, mud spraying, and the platoon erupted with laughter. Casey offered a single glance, almost imperceptible, before continuing her climb over the wall. No mocking, no smiles, no hesitation, just movement. By the time we reached the rope climb, the rain soaked through to the skin, and fingers slipped against wet cords. One by one, trainees struggled, voices cracking with fatigue and frustration. Casey's hands were raw, small cuts forming along her knuckles, but she ascended each rope with a steady rhythm, never faltering, never looking down. Lucas, panting and cursing, stumbled again, and some of the platoon called out sarcastic cheers. Casey's jaw tightened slightly. That tiny movement, it was the only acknowledgement of the ridicule, but she didn't respond in kind. During a brief pause, Corporal Johnson approached quietly, his hood pulled low against the rain. He didn't say much, just handed her a small bottle of water and a nod. That single act, quiet and almost invisible to the others, felt heavier than any words of encouragement. Casey caught his eyes for a fraction of a second, just a flicker of recognition, and returned to the drills, hands gripping ropes, boots digging into slick mud, determination etched across her features. Chow Hall came next, and the smell of reheated eggs and powdered coffee did nothing to lift the mood. Casey sat alone on the far bench, tray balanced neatly, eating silently while others mocked her choice of simple food. "What again? No pancakes today, Harper," one called. Another added, "Bet you're saving your strength for something dramatic, huh?" She didn't react, but I noticed her eyes sweeping the room, scanning, always observing. I swear there was something brewing behind that calm exterior, something they couldn't see yet. The afternoon drills were worse. Drill Sergeant Miller assigned team-based exercises, pairing Casey with the most arrogant trainees. Lucas and Marcy, both sure they'd break her down. "Don't let her slow you," Miller barked, a cruel smirk playing across his face. The mockery started immediately. "Oh, great. She's going to drag us through the mud again," Lucas said, loud enough for the whole squad to hear. Marcy laughed, elbowing him, eyes full of superiority. Casey just nodded once, accepted her place in the formation, and began observing the obstacles ahead. As the exercise began, it was clear Casey was calculating more than just physical movement. She noticed the weak rope, the loose plank, the slick metal beams, all hazards others had ignored. When Lucas slipped trying to jump across a beam, she caught him with one hand, steadying him without a word. He froze, staring at her, surprised, embarrassed, but no one else had noticed. "Thanks," he muttered, barely audible, and she simply nodded before moving on, leaving him to process the moment. The whispers and snickers had turned into a tense silence around her. By mid-afternoon, fatigue and mud were taking their toll. Casey's muscles burned, her soaked clothes clung uncomfortably, yet she kept going, quietly correcting mistakes, adjusting angles, and making small suggestions without drawing attention. The team began to notice the difference, hesitation giving way to reluctant respect. "Maybe she knows something we don't," someone murmured. But Casey didn't stop to explain. Her focus never wavered. Then came the moment that would define the day. The instructor announced a surprise time relay, combining all the skills we'd practiced into one grueling challenge. The rain had picked up again, wind slicing across the yard, but there was no backing down. The team scrambled, shouting and slipping, panic setting in as seconds ticked away. Casey's team lagged behind initially, Lucas and Marcy fumbling, voices cracking. The other squads were already halfway through. Casey called out brief instructions, voice calm and low, but every word cut through the chaos like a drill sergeant's bark. "Left foot steady, hold the rope, cover the gap." What happened next shocked everyone. Casey sprang forward with precise timing, catching Marcy before she fell into the mud, pulling Lucas across the beam safely, and taking control of the relay without hesitation. Her team, for the first time, moved like a single unit, guided by her quiet authority. The finish line approached faster than anyone expected. As they crossed it first, the rain masking sweat and mud, the yard fell silent. Drill Sergeant Miller's eyes widened, his smirk gone. The very trainees who mocked her hours ago stood frozen, staring. Casey, dripping and exhausted, didn't cheer, didn't smile triumphantly. She just adjusted her cap, straightened her jacket, and surveyed the yard, as if this had been routine. Corporal Johnson was there, watching silently, a slight nod of approval this time more visible. Even he seemed caught off guard by how she handled the chaos, the danger, the team. For once, the arrogance of the other trainees was matched with a quiet, undeniable competence that none of them could ignore. What I realized in that moment was simple. This was more than skill. This was discipline, focus, and resilience earned through struggle, not attention. The kind of strength that can't be mocked or bought. It commands respect quietly, insistently. That night, as we returned to the barracks, the whispers weren't gone. Some were admiring, some still bitter, but there was a shift, subtle and irreversible. Casey sat on the edge of her bunk, reviewing her notes from the drills, marking improvements silently, methodically. The rain had soaked through everything, yet she seemed untouched, a calm eye in the storm of our collective fatigue and embarrassment. The same people who doubted her the day before were now watching, wondering, calculating. I couldn't stop thinking about the relay, about the way she moved through chaos like she had done it all her life. Something told me this wasn't the end of her story. Something told me that whatever came next would be even bigger, even more impossible. And I knew without a doubt that when it came, nobody would be able to doubt her strength again. She had endured humiliation, mastered struggle, and turned quiet resilience into undeniable authority. What I didn't realize yet was just how far that would take her, and how utterly shocked we would all be when the full truth finally came to light. The sun had barely risen when the alarm sounded across Fort Pendleton, a shrill call cutting through the cold morning air. Private Casey Harper was already awake, boots polished, uniform damp from the overnight drizzle. Today wasn't just another drill day. It was the field evaluation, a test no one wanted but everyone feared. The platoon assembled in the yard, rain-soaked and restless, the mud threatening to swallow our boots with every step. Drill Sergeant Miller's voice boomed across the formation. "Move! Eyes forward! Today separates the capable from the weak." Lucas shot Casey a smirk, tossing a mud-slick stick toward her feet. "Think you can handle it today, Harper? Or are we carrying you again?" A few of the other trainees chuckled, nudging each other. Casey's gaze didn't waver. She adjusted her pack, hands steady on the straps. There was no smile, no retort, only a silent calm that unnerved Lucas more than any shouted command could. The first phase was a simulated combat scenario in the woods behind the base. Teams were dropped in with minimal supplies in order to locate and extract a stranded, wounded soldier. Casey's team had been assigned Lucas and Marcy, both confident they'd humiliate her yet again. But as soon as the whistle blew, Casey took the lead. She scanned the terrain, noting uneven ground, hidden roots, and low-hanging branches that would trip the unprepared. "Left flank, stay low," she instructed, voice firm but quiet, cutting through the chaos. Marcy rolled her eyes, muttering, "Yeah, right. Let's see how this goes." Lucas shuffled behind, frowning, still trying to undermine her authority. But as the squad moved forward, it became clear that Casey had memorized the layout from yesterday's maps, marking safe paths and possible hazards. Every step she directed was precise, almost surgical. The others stumbled and cursed, yet Casey remained steady, her focus absolute. Halfway through, the unexpected happened. A simulated landmine device hidden beneath leaves triggered a loud bang. Lucas panicked, throwing himself to the ground. Marcy screamed, caught off guard. Casey was on them in seconds, dragging them to cover without hesitation. Her hands moved with trained efficiency, securing them behind a fallen log as bullets, simulated, but startlingly loud, cracked around them. For the first time, the team realized she wasn't just competent. She was lethal, precise, and unshakable. Corporal Johnson appeared on the ridge above, silently observing, his face a mask, but his eyes betraying pride. He had noticed Casey's quiet endurance, her ability to anticipate danger, and now it was clear that she wasn't just surviving, she was leading. The platoon, previously laughing at her, now watched in tense silence. Even Drill Sergeant Miller seemed momentarily taken aback, his usual smirk replaced by a tight line of scrutiny. The team reached the extraction point, only to find the vehicle simulation disabled, a mechanical failure no one expected. Panic rippled through the squad, voices rising, orders shouted in confusion. Casey crouched, scanning the surroundings. "We improvise," she said, calm but commanding. "Marcy, cover the left. Lucas, check the perimeter. I'll set up the extraction signal." Her team moved, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence, following her direction. As Casey prepared the signal, a sudden hazard appeared. A narrow bridge over a rushing creek, slick with rain. Lucas froze, backing away. Marcy looked at Casey, eyes wide. Without hesitation, Casey stepped forward, one hand steady on the rope, the other extended to them. "Trust me, I've got this," she said. And for a moment, time seemed to slow. The wind howled, rain blinded, and every muscle in Casey's body tensed. But she crossed first, guiding the others safely across. The moment was silent, yet explosive, leaving the squad in awe. At that instant, the field instructors approached, recording data and taking notes. But even they paused to observe. Drill Sergeant Miller muttered under his breath, "Where did she come from?" Lucas and Marcy stood frozen, pride shattered, their mockery stripped away by undeniable competence. Casey's calm, controlled authority had flipped the dynamic completely. She wasn't the underdog anymore. She was the standard. Then came the real shock. A voice over the comms crackled. "Harper, confirm position. This is Lieutenant Carter. Situation flagged Alpha. Immediate extraction required." Every trainee froze. Lucas's jaw dropped. Marcy's grip tightened on her pack. Casey's eyes flicked up, not in fear, but recognition. The calm she exuded all morning had a reason. It wasn't just skill, it was experience. Without hesitation, Casey coordinated the simulated extraction, her voice clear and precise. "Coordinates confirmed. Approach Vector 3. Security sweep initiated." The instructors watched, mouths open, as she moved with the authority of someone who had done this before, who had faced danger for real. The extraction proceeded flawlessly, and the lieutenant appeared on the comm feed, confirming every action. The simulated mission became indistinguishable from a real tactical operation. Lucas, still soaked and mud-covered, whispered, She's been through this before, hasn't she?" Marcy could only nod, eyes wide. Casey, drenched and exhausted, adjusted her pack, but there was no gloating. No triumph in her expression, only focus, the calm assurance of someone who knows the stakes, who knows the weight of responsibility. Corporal Johnson finally stepped forward, voice low but audible. "That's leadership, that's experience, and she just earned every bit of respect this platoon owes her." The rest of the squad exchanged stunned glances. Even Drill Sergeant Miller's tone softened, tinged with reluctant admiration. The very people who had mocked her, doubted her, tried to diminish her presence, were now silent, watching, recalculating their perception of her entirely. Back at the barracks, whispers spread like wildfire. Trainees replayed every moment of the exercise, dissecting her precision, her calm under pressure, her ability to lead in a storm. Lucas avoided her gaze. Marcy's snide remarks silenced permanently. The small acts that had seemed insignificant yesterday, her observation, her endurance, her quiet focus, were now the reasons she commanded the room without ever raising her voice. That night, Casey sat on her bunk, uniform still damp, reviewing every move from the exercise. The squad had left for showers, meals, and murmured conversations. Her reflection in the window showed someone transformed, forged in struggle, humility, and relentless discipline. Something unspoken had shifted, not just in the squad, but in the very air of the barracks. Casey Harper was no longer an underestimated private. She was a force quietly recognized by those who mattered. And somewhere in that quiet moment, I realized what was coming next. What we thought we knew about her past, about her capability, was only scratching the surface. The explosive revelation of her experience, her skill, and her authority would hit us all in ways none of us could imagine. And when it did, there would be no undoing the respect she had earned. No, ignoring the truth of her strength. The underdog had become the standard, and the world around her was about to catch up. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The morning sun filtered through the barracks blinds, catching dust motes and sharp golden shafts. Casey Harper was already up, lacing her boots quietly while the rest of the platoon groaned and shuffled in the mess hall. The events of the field evaluation still lingered in everyone's minds, unspoken but palpable. Lucas avoided her gaze as he poured cereal into a bowl, muttering under his breath, "Guess we underestimated her. Big time." Marcy, silent and awkward, pushed her tray forward without a word. Corporal Johnson appeared at the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Harper, report to my office. Now." Casey followed, feeling the weight of every curious glance from the other trainees. Something was coming. She could feel it. A reckoning, or maybe the acknowledgement of her work, though the exact nature of it remained uncertain. In Johnson's office, the corporal gestured to the screen on his desk, displaying footage from yesterday's exercise. Casey leaned in, recognizing her own movements, her calm commands, her precise coordination. "They're shocked," Johnson said quietly. "Not just the squad. You know Miller, right? He's fuming that he didn't see this coming." Casey nodded, letting the silence hang for a moment. She wasn't looking for praise. She was watching the ripple her actions had caused. Back in the barracks, Lucas and Marcy sat together, silent but tense. "I thought she was just another rookie," Lucas admitted, voice low, almost defeated. Marcy looked down, fiddling with her sleeves. "I never realized she's been through real ops. That's not something you fake." Their whispers were interrupted by the shrill call of the chow hall bell. As the platoon assembled, eyes still lingered on Casey, a mix of awe, fear, and curiosity, now replacing previous mockery. During the morning drill, the squad was tasked with a new obstacle course, one designed to test coordination under pressure. Lucas stumbled early, mud-coating his uniform as Casey effortlessly directed him around the hurdles. "Keep your balance, Lucas. Focus." Her voice was calm but commanding, and the others followed instinctively. It was subtle, but the shift in power was unmistakable. Casey was no longer just a participant. She was leading, without even raising her profile. Then came the unforeseen challenge, a simulated casualty on the high rope course. Marcy froze, peering down at the injured trainee dangling midair. Casey didn't hesitate. She scaled the ropes, securing the casualty while issuing concise directions to Lucas and two others for support. Each movement was flawless, precise, practiced. The platoon watched, mouths open, realizing that her calm was not arrogance. It was experience born from real danger. After the exercise, the squad gathered in the common area, the air thick with tension and unspoken admiration. Drill Sergeant Miller stormed in, his face red, voice sharp. "Harper, explain why you took over the extraction protocol yesterday. That's above your rank." Casey didn't flinch. "I followed procedure and secured the team, Sergeant. The mission objective was met without casualty." Her tone was factual, without a hint of defiance. The room held its breath. Even Miller hesitated, the usual sharpness in his eyes replaced with begrudging respect. The climax came later that afternoon when the platoon was briefed on an incoming inspection. Equipment checks, readiness drills, and tactical reports were all to be reviewed. Casey's prior actions had made her the center of attention, though she kept a low profile, quietly arranging supplies and briefing notes. Lucas tried to undermine her again, nudging papers and whispering sarcastically. "Think anyone will notice if we switch her notes?" he muttered. Casey glanced at him, expression unchanged, and continued her work. But then, an unexpected twist. One of the review officers asked about the efficiency of yesterday's exercise, directly calling for details. Lucas stumbled, unprepared to answer. Casey stepped forward, delivering a precise, detailed report of every movement, every strategy, every contingency handled. Her words painted a vivid image of calm authority under chaos. The review officer's eyes widened. "Who trained you for this?" he asked. The room fell silent. In that moment, the balance shifted permanently. Those who had mocked her were frozen, stunned into silence by the undeniable truth. Lucas's earlier arrogance evaporated, replaced by visible shame. Marcy looked at Casey with awe, the previous judgment replaced by unspoken apology. Even Drill Sergeant Miller's tone softened, the command in his voice now tinged with acknowledgement. Casey's competence had forced a collective redefinition of her status. The underdog was now the standard-bearer. Later that evening, the squad lounged quietly in the barracks. Whispers circulated about the precision of her movements, the calm authority she exuded, the unshakable focus she maintained under pressure. Corporal Johnson approached, nodding slightly at her bunks. "You've set a new benchmark, Harper. Everyone's watching now, even Miller." Casey didn't respond. She simply nodded, allowing her actions to speak louder than words. In the quiet of her bunk, Casey reflected on the journey so far. The humiliation, the doubt, the endless scrutiny. It had forged her. And now those same people who had dismissed her were beginning to understand. Respect had been earned not with words but with unwavering discipline, unwavering calm, and precise action when it mattered most. As lights dimmed in the barracks, Casey tightened the straps on her pack, eyes flicking toward the window. Tomorrow would bring new drills, new tests, but the power dynamic had shifted. The squad had seen what she was capable of. What they didn't yet know was the full measure of her past, the depth of her experience. That revelation would come soon, and when it did, it would leave no doubt who was truly in command. Not by rank alone, but by skill, discipline, and quiet, undeniable authority. The stage was set, and the storm had only begun. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The morning was quieter than usual at Fort Carlisle. The sun had barely crested the horizon, and the barracks hummed with the soft shuffle of boots and low murmurs of soldiers preparing for the day. Casey Harper stood at attention near the flagpole, her eyes tracing the folds of the American flag as it rippled in the light breeze. Today was different. Everyone knew it, even if they wouldn't say it out loud. Corporal Johnson approached, nodding with a faint smile. "Ready for inspection?" he asked. Casey's posture remained straight, voice steady. "Always, sir." Behind him, the squad watched from a distance, the mix of awe and respect lingering in their expressions. Lucas lingered near the mess hall steps, hesitant to speak, while Marcy shifted nervously, a subtle nod acknowledging Casey's quiet authority. The morning drills began with routine precision, marching, equipment checks, tactical simulations. But there was a new intensity in every soldier's movement. Casey moved through the exercises like a metronome, calm and deliberate, offering concise guidance when someone faltered. The previous mockery seemed a distant memory, replaced by quiet cooperation. Yet beneath the surface, she carried a weight they didn't yet fully grasp. The years of experience, the missions in hostile zones, the lives she had coordinated and protected. During the mid-morning tactical simulation, an unexpected complication arose. The comm system malfunctioned, leaving the platoon temporarily blind to incoming instructions. Panic bubbled in some, tension rising sharply. Casey didn't hesitate. She assessed the situation quickly, issuing clear commands to reestablish order and coordinate movement. Her voice was steady, unwavering, a beacon amid confusion. Soldiers who had doubted her followed instinctively, marveling at the authority she carried without demanding it. After the drill, the platoon assembled in the mess hall. Conversations were hushed, soldiers exchanging glances. Sergeant Miller finally stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Harper," he said, eyes scanning the room, "you've set the bar for this platoon. Your actions, your focus. It's nothing short of exemplary." A murmur ran through the room. Lucas's jaw tightened. He avoided her gaze. Marcy's lips quivered as she finally spoke, voice low but sincere. "We misjudged you. All of us." Casey nodded once, letting the acknowledgement settle. No boast, no triumph, just quiet dignity. Then came the final surprise, the true revelation that left everyone stunned. A senior officer entered, holding a folder thick with commendations. "Harper, your service record precedes you. Lieutenant Harper, youngest officer to coordinate a high-risk evacuation in a red zone operation." The words hung in the air, weighty and undeniable. The room went silent. Even the most arrogant faces were drained of smirks. Casey's calm authority now had context. The history that had shaped her discipline and resilience was laid bare for all to see. Lucas swallowed hard, guilt flashing across his features. Sergeant Miller's respect was evident in the rigid straightening of his posture. Marcy reached subtly toward Casey, offering a quiet smile of solidarity. The tension of weeks, mockery, doubt, isolation, dissolved in that single seismic shift. Casey's journey from underestimated recruit to respected leader was complete, not through words or self-promotion, but through unwavering skill, quiet endurance, and undeniable courage. As the day closed, Casey returned to the barracks, footsteps echoing softly on the hardwood floors. She paused at her bunk, adjusting her gear, glancing at the small photo tucked in her pack, a reminder of why she endured every insult and every trial. Outside, the flag fluttered in the late afternoon breeze, a symbol of duty, honor, and resilience. Around her, the squad moved differently now, with respect threaded into every glance, every salute, every nod of acknowledgement. Later, as the barracks lights dimmed and whispers of admiration softened into silence, Casey allowed herself a brief exhale. She had walked through humiliation, proven herself through resilience, and now stood as a living example of what discipline and courage could accomplish. The lesson was clear to all. Respect is earned, strength is quiet but formidable, and true leadership shines brightest when least expected. The weight of the journey lifted slightly from her shoulders, but the path ahead remained, a future full of challenges, full of purpose, and full of silent victories yet to come. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The sun dipped low over Fort Carlisle, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Casey Harper stood at attention, the wind tugging at her uniform, her eyes steady beneath the folds of the American flag. Around her, the squad snapped to a crisp salute, silence ringing out like a drumbeat of respect. Sergeant Miller, once a voice of harsh reprimand, offered a single slow nod, a gesture heavier than words. Even Lucas, who had mocked and doubted her, lowered his head in unspoken acknowledgement. The weight of every trial, every whispered insult, every doubted step had led to this moment, and it hung in the air like a quiet victory. Looking out across the barracks, Casey allowed herself a small, reflective breath. Life in the military teaches you hard lessons. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and actions always speak louder than words. She had endured humiliation, worked in silence, and met every challenge with quiet discipline. The trials had forged not only skill and strength, but respect earned honestly, without need for fanfare. Prejudice and doubt had met resilience and unwavering focus, and in the end, dignity had carried the day. This story reminds us that honor is not given. It is lived step by step in the moments no one else sees. Brotherhood is found in silent recognition, in the steady hands beside yours during chaos. And courage is not just in the battlefield. It is in enduring ridicule, in carrying your mission through when no one believes you can. Equality, respect, and humanity flourish when integrity and patience guide every action. You reap what you sow, and sometimes the quietest soldier leaves the loudest impact. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts or personal experiences in the comments below. Hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so we can continue walking through stories of resilience, honor, and courage together. Remember, even in silence, your strength is seen, your actions remembered, and your journey matters. Stay steady, comrades, and carry this spirit forward.